Good afternoon. Hi there. How are you? My name is Pat Campbell, radio talk show host from Tulsa, Oklahoma. You are watching The Rational Male 101 with Rollo Tomassi, the rational male himself, the cult leader. This is episode 37, Setting Boundaries in Your Relationship. So how you been, Rollo?
Good. How are you, man?
Pretty good.
We had a pretty good show on Friday too, huh?
Yes, we had a great show on Friday. And I want to start today. I saw a tweet on the psychology of dick pics. And I want to tie this into boundaries in a relationship. And I want to do it from, a guy-girl perspective, but also as a parent. This is something I've talked about in the past. And we've officially have been on record, both of us, never, ever, ever, ever under penalty of death, send a dick pic to anybody. The reality is nobody wants to see your junk. I don't care how well you're hung. Nobody cares. No, there's no woman out there thirsting for that picture, hoping and praying that you're going to send it to her. And as we've seen time and time again with political figures and media personalities, it can come back to bite you and bite your heart, right? So they had this thing up here. It's called
there's no easy way to say this without jokes just flowing out.
Absolutely. So some of the stats here on this tweet were interesting. They said 50% of women ages 18 through 36 have received unsolicited dick pics. Okay, that I believe. In fact, I think the number is probably low. It's probably higher, don't you?
Higher than that.
Yeah, and then the new research they studied 1,000 men, and it said 48% of them admitted to sending one. Now, what I'd want to know about that is what's the age range there?
Right.
Because I would tend to think that would skew a lot younger than it would older, don't you?
Yeah, I'm about to throw a monkey wrench into your whole thing because we've talked about this before. And the first person that I think of when this comes up, and unfortunately, because I really like the guy, Brett Favre. He's never going to live down the fact that he sent a dick pic to that one cute little cheerleader right before his final retirement. Yeah. And it really kind of, I wanted to believe in the hype, man. I wanted to believe in my hero, right? But it's never a good idea. It's never a good idea when you're a celebrity. It's never a good idea, irrespective of whoever you are, because I think there's no real good way to put your junk in good light when it comes from a cell phone. Okay. I mean, you're taking a picture of your junk, right? And I think what's interesting and on the tweet stream or the tweet thread that you're talking about right now is they're saying, that I think what's the mystery here is why does this seem like a good idea? Why do guys do this? Why is this, something that's going on now? A lot of people want to say, well, it's because it's from guys who are already in a relationship with a girl, and it's the next evolution, I guess, of sexting, right? Of sending, back in the day, remember when they had like the 976 lines, the sex phone lines were phone sex, right? That was a big deal back in my youth, right?
And it wound up being some fat chick living in a mobile.
Yeah, exactly.
Just 3 kids.
Some girl with a real husky voice and probably like 100 pounds overweight. But they made a living. I mean, that was interesting because back then it was big enough that it was sort of a phenomenon back in the day when you just get on the phone, you didn't even have to see the person. Well, now we're in an age where it's easier to do this kind of stuff. It's easier. So it's like, if you had the opportunity, would the people of like, say, our generation back when we were in our 20s or in our teens, would we be doing this? I don't know. Well, because I think that there is a certain comfort with having that screen in front of you. With that I've always talked about this. I talked about this in the first book. It's a buffer. It's a buffer against rejection. And so I think guys get too comfortable and they think that this is going to really turn her on, or this is going to be something. And I'm wondering, like, when we hear about dick pics, we hear about them from the respect of like, maybe it's not such a random thing. Maybe the girl, I mean, imagine this. Imagine you have you've got your girlfriends around you. You're because I know how girls are. They're always very social. It's this, girls talk, right? Right. So it's like you got girls, you got a girl with her girlfriends over. You don't know that the girlfriends are there, and she says, "Send me a dick pic," and they're all there, and they're ready to laugh at you because you just sent them a dick pic. How many of these are prompted by women? How many of these are unsolicited dick pics? I know that the stat says they were unsolicited. How many of them were sent because the guy was comfortable enough to go and send that? Or how many of them were just these creepy guys saying, "Oh, check out my junk," you know?
Here, let me throw this at you. Part of the reason I am so repulsed or repelled by it, okay, is first of all, there is no attractive junk. You know, a female nude can be very, very attractive, very pretty. I think when I hear dick pic, you know what pops in my head? I mean, if we're doing word association, Anthony Weiner, and that makes me think creeper, somebody who is preying on underage girls, send a picture of his junk, and then he wouldn't even own up to it. And you know, the funny thing is, when he was on with Rachel Maddow, and she flat out asked him if it was his response was, "I wish." And it was like, oh man, I knew right then and there, he's in. You know, that was him. But you think of somebody. First of all, there's a world of difference if there's been a request for it, and I haven't had a request to date, so I think I'm pretty safe. Okay, or if it's unsolicited, to send something like that to somebody, okay, that maybe you just met, just barely know. That's a risky thing to do. But some people, I don't know. Some people, guys are thrilled by risk. Sometimes girls are thrilled by risk. It depends what you're trying to attract.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like for you and I, we grew up in a different generation where we see this happen. We can sort of think, I mean, we're using abstract thought when we think about this kind of stuff. I would like to know, I don't know if this is even possible to get stats like this, but like, what's the demographic of guys who are doing this?
That's exactly what I said. Yeah. Are they younger? Right.
Yeah. Are they younger? Are they older? I mean, you're talking about Anthony Weiner. Okay. There's one. Brett Favre, older, at least my age. Right. I mean, why does that seem like a good idea?
Right.
Well, first of all, I think the first thing guys got to remember, it's never a good idea. So let's just get that out. Let's just put that out.
It goes back to Tom Likas back in the day with his advice. He says, never, ever, ever, under any circumstance, record yourself having sex with somebody. He says, I don't care how hot you think you are, how good it looks at the time. It will always, I repeat, always come back to bite you. That's solid advice.
Yes, and it has been for a long time now too. I think even back in the day when people were we didn't have the internet, or it wasn't quite as pronounced. We certainly didn't have live streaming video back in the day, but people were still inclined to do that once they had like a handy cam or something like that. I think that there's a mentality right now for this generation that just doesn't have that buffer, that they think that just because I'm behind the screen that I'm anonymous, or it's, here you can see a picture of my dick, but it's not, you don't see it's my face. So how can you put one with the other? Whereas, you're right. It can be used against you. And it always will
hold
be
on.
used.
Hold on. If your name's Bill Clinton, you got Peyronie's disease. I know it's twisted, right? Everybody knows. That's how Paula Jones actually identified him in court, because he has distinguishing characteristics on his junk.
Yeah. I mean, it's never going to be a good idea, particularly in the age of Me Too. And so, but even in spite of that, even with guys who know this, they still think it's a good idea. Why is that? Well, the first thing is that these guys, most of these guys, remember, let's go back to the Pareto principle here. 80% of guys are beta guys. They don't have the same opportunities as a guy who is, say, more alpha, or has more, let's just say, is of higher sexual market value. So you've got guys that are lower sexual market value getting finally to the point where they're going to be having sex with a woman, and they think that it's a good idea to do something like this, and repeatedly so. So it's not just one dick pic. It's like, here's my dick pic. Oh, and then a week later, here's another dick pic. Or this worked last time. Or if it didn't work because I sent her a dick pic, maybe if I sent her this other one, or maybe it's me by the Taj Mahal in my dick pic, or what, something in, some way to change up the context of it. Because there's this idea, particularly for guys who don't have the opportunity to understand women. They don't have the experience of women. They don't understand how women's sexual nature works.
Here's the fundamental flaw. When guys send the picture, they assume that women are stimulated the same way guys are. Guys are visually stimulated. Women, that's not their first line. Now, that's not to say that women can't be, because we're seeing, you brought up stats from Pornhub a while back, where more and more women are watching pornography. But that is not their natural inclination. Women don't get turned on. Let me put it this way. Women do not get aroused the same way men do.
Right. Well, I will say this is, back in the day, back when I was in my late 20s, I had a workout partner, and this guy I've written about him before. His name was Dean. Real great dude. At 6'1", 6'2", and the guy was just like ripped and built like a bodybuilder. And on the last weekend of every month, he used to do an all male review up here or out here in Nevada, and I would hang out with the guy, and because it was great. It was a great way to meet chicks, but most of these women tend to be a little bit older, but he had some really hot stripper girlfriends. So we were always hanging out. And one time we were hanging out, and he was telling me, he said, you can't just go up there and look good, because I was of the impression that all you had to do was look like Dean. All you had to do was be ripped and tan and everything. But he had this thing where he always had to tell a story that went along with it. It's not enough just for women to see a hot looking dude and get worked up over that guy. It has to be the hot fireman. It has to be the hot executive. There has to be a backstory to it. So if you always wonder why something like 50 Shades of Grey is so popular, it's because it stimulates that part. That's why we call like romance novels like female pornography, because it's not just the way the guys looks or the sex act itself. It's the whole enchilada. It's everything that led up to that sort of works them up to that point. And I think that guys don't really understand that. That's why they think a dick pic is a good idea, because, and here's what I was going to get into, is a lot of, like, I read that part of that you were talking about, how these guys, mostly beta men, don't understand how a woman's sexuality really works. But here's what they do. They insert their own reality into that whole equation. And what is that reality? That reality is they've been taught from a very early age by the blue pill, by their conditioning, that men and women are equals, that it's all blank slate egalitarianism. So what turns me on as a man must be what turns her on as a woman. So let's see how I can make a play on that. And well, women are visual. Or here's the other thing. And I've said this 100 times, but we could probably do a whole show on this. But if you've read my first book, there's a part in there where it's a chapter called Women and Sexuality, or Women and Sex. And it was to debunk this myth that women are just as sexual as men. This is a myth. This is BS. Okay. And I'll tell you why, because first of all, if you just think about it, women's sexuality is cyclic. Okay. She becomes more sexual. She becomes more what they call, it's not prosexual, it's something else, proceptive. She becomes more proceptive to sex around her ovulation, and then later, after she's in her down cycle of her menstrual cycle, she starts into that nesting cycle, and she wants comfort and everything else. So right then and there, you can see that the sexual nature between men and women is biologically fundamentally different.
I've got a doctor I bring on, Dr. Jim Meehan. We talk about hormone replacement therapy. For guys, you want to keep it constant. You want to get your testosterone level in a particular zone and keep it there. That's why they want to do frequent shots so it stays even. With women, it's a whole putting women on hormone replacement therapy is much more complex, because there is that ebb and flow. You want to mimic their actual cycle. So it's very different. If somebody were to meet you, in the first 2 weeks of their cycle as opposed to the last 2 weeks of their cycle, what they're looking for is going to be different. You talked about red. That's why I wore the red shirt today, of course. Mm-hmm. But when women are in their ovulatory cycle, what was the story? That they tend to wear more red.
They tend to opt for what's called sexual ornamentation. So they dress up. The other thing is and we can get into ovulatory shift, but when they get into their proliferative stage of their menstrual cycle, they become proceptive to sex. They wear red. Like there's a whole thing about it. It's a joke now, right? That if you see a woman wearing red, it means she's ovulating. She's wearing something sexy. That means that she is out there looking for the guy that she wants to reproduce with. So there's that. She wears the hoop earrings. She does her makeup differently. She goes out, has a girls' night out when she's not planning it, but her hindbrain and her subconscious is planning that. There's a great book by Dr. Marty Hasselton. It's called Hormonal. So if you can get past her like feminist street cred, it's got some really, really great, like concrete. People always say, well, Rollo's really short on his statistics. You want stats? Go read that book right there.
But here's the other thing with the women. Okay. And you talk about this in one of your books about female bodybuilders, but female bodybuilders, female physique competitors, if they're supplementing testosterone, because a woman has like 1/15 of the testosterone a guy does. When women go on testosterone, all of a sudden they get a little glimpse of what it's like to be a guy. You're like always on, you're always looking. They're hornier than they've ever been. And it's not cyclical like it would normally be.
Yeah, because they change things up. They mimic the body chemistry of a man. So I believe it's anywhere between 12 and 17 times the amount of serum testosterone in a man versus a woman.
Right.
And you're right. That was actually part of that same story that I was telling. When my brother used to be an amateur circuit bodybuilder, so I used to hang out with a lot of these guys who were bodybuilders and female bodybuilders as well. And some of them were on gear. So. Like when they would say, I can't believe you guys live like this. Like the first thing is when they first started doing decabulin or whatever that is that they were doing. That's the first thing they would say is, I can't believe you guys live like this. Because all they want to do is have sex at that point because their body is now mimicking that of a man, And so for men, and this is the way we evolved, we're evolved to be always on. Because back in the day we had to, and I'm going to steal John from Modern Life Dating's quote here. You had to ejaculate and evacuate. You had to get in, have sex, hopefully reproduce, and get out as fast as you could, because you didn't know if you were going to get killed by somebody, some member of her tribe or her family or whatever else, or maybe she's, maybe she's paired off with somebody. But if you want, and here's another great book, Promiscuity by Tim Burke. It's one of them. I'm kind of picking my way back through again with a highlighter now, because there's a lot of really concrete evolutionary psychology that goes along with this. But that's just the way we are. For women, it's different. Women are cyclic. And so their sexuality, what brings them up to speed, what gets them off, is not the same thing that gets a guy off. Men are always on. Women's sexuality is cyclic. Now, that said, women are more sexual than guys are willing to admit, because most beta guys believe that a woman is, we got to respect her and we got to have her, respect her honor. Or we didn't, there was for a very long time, we didn't want to believe that women were visual, and they're very much visual when it comes to sex, but they're not only visual. So for a man, in the list of priorities and the things that turn us on, visual stimulation is the number one thing. There might be other things that are along with that, but if you go to any strip club, you can find out for yourself that visual stimulation is really all there is. So when you go to a strip club and women are just taking off their clothes, there doesn't need to be any backstory for a guy. There doesn't need to be any kind of like, oh, she's a sexy fire girl. There's none of that. It's just like,
by the way, the storytelling. Okay. And this is something I didn't pick up on in my radio career until probably 10, maybe even 15 years in it, but it's such an important component. The best radio talk show hosts are great storytellers. Yes. And as my storytelling ability improved, I attracted more and more female listeners. It's more important to the women, especially if you're going to make an emotional connection. That's why guys fall in love with their eyes visually. Women fall in love up here. And if you're in here, you can have anything you want.
Yes. And that is the number one thing when it comes to actually even modern pickup artistry, is to leave that woman with an emotional connection. That's how you do it. The best seducers, the best PUAs, those are the guys who can tell a good story. Those are the guys who can keep you engaged. Those are the guys who can get into a woman's head, get her qualifying and become a conversationalist. So yeah, absolutely. So what happens then is guys think that women are just as sexual as they are, that they believe this myth. They believe the idea that if she is sending you nudes, that means that it's okay for you to reciprocate with a dick pic. No, it is not. Only if for no other reason, then it can be used against you in a court of law whenever she decides to me too you. So my general rule of thumb is always never, never send a dick pic. But here's the thing: is I think we're kind of failing in this right now, because we're talking about the next generation, maybe not Generation Z, but certainly the millennial generation is dependent on buffers. They're dependent on that screen between us, and they think that it's okay to be doing something like this based on a lot of misinformation. But you were talking about this, and maybe we can move this on so we can get into boundaries here a little bit. But you were saying you are more scared of women or your girls sending out like nudes or something like
No,
that.
not my girls. Okay,
Not your girls, but like girls in general.
I've got 5 children, 3 girls, 2 boys. Cell phones, while you're living under my roof, those are all registered in my name. Okay, and my boys in particular, I had an extra special conversation with, because it's the girls sending them stuff that I've got to worry about, as opposed to them sending girls stuff. And here's the deal. Let's say, I don't know, you're a sophomore in high school, 15-year-old girl sent you a picture. That's on daddy's cell phone. Those phones are registered to daddy. That is technically, in the state of Oklahoma, in most states, that's considered child pornography, kiddie porn. And I told my boys, I said, if you ever get something like that, I said, I don't care what the deal is, you're not going to get in trouble. You just bring the phone to me immediately, because I've got to do something. And because and there's been people that have been, there's actually been people prosecuted for doing that. And by the way, the prosecution almost always goes exclusively male. An 18-year-old boy mailing a 16-year-old or text or sending a picture to a 16-year-old girl that's his girlfriend, but it's a dick pic. Guess who's going to jail? It's him. Now, if it's reversed, it's different. You could have a 35-year-old female teacher sending her kid, 14-year-old in her class pictures, or she won't do any jail time. But the guy will.
Yeah,
But no, there's a difference there, and we were also talking after getting away from kids for a minute about the graphic nature of pictures. If somebody, and this is me, okay, and it may be a generational thing with me, but if I were to get a very graphic picture of somebody's, snatch, for lack of a better term, right out of the gate, to me, that's going to be a turnoff. There is when you talked about it earlier, the art of seduction. Women can be very sexual without even taking their clothes off, and then there's gradual things that would be done, but something like that, graphic and hard, right out of the gate, for me, that would be, just right. I don't really want to.
Yeah, exactly. You would want to talk about, overplaying your hand.
Right.
Visual stimulation is something that men evolved to be cued off of for arousal. So when we see, for one of the things is for guys to see 2 girls kissing or to see 2 girls going after it, we kind of have this conflict because our nature for us to see something like that sees it as like a bonus, right? It's like, I can reproduce with 2 girls, right? That's your evolved understanding, your evolved interpretation, but that conflicts with your learned what you've learned about that. So when we see a centerfold, when we see a girl who is even just half naked, it triggers a part in men's brains that is associated with tool use, because we're trying to find a way to solve a problem. And that problem is, how do I reproduce? So when I see those cues, when any male sees those cues and their testosterone is at a certain level, they're going to become aroused by that. They're going to see that. And that's just something I think it's really interesting, because when we talk about seduction, I've always said that the greatest seducers of history have always been male. They haven't been female, because it's so easy for women to seduce men, because there's already that innate understanding. So, and I think that's kind of gotten a little lost in the mix right now for this generation, because women, first of all, feminism has told women that they should never do anything for the express pleasure of a man, as it is anyways. So when a woman sends a nude to a guy, that not only is the guy dealing with it on an evolutionary, like an innate, instinctual level, right, now he also has to figure things out on a cognitive level as well. Right. And we're not teaching I'm glad to hear that that's what you're doing with your boys right now. But I think by and large, we're not doing that anymore. We want to teach our boys to be responsible. We have to teach them sexual control, because that's just how we are. We want
I want to get into that, but since you mentioned seduction, one of the best books, The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. It is really the same guy that wrote the 48 Laws of Power, but self-control. Okay, so and again, self-identified as a recovering tradcon. Okay, growing up, very Catholic family. Yes, you've got a libido. Okay, but guys, the gold standard for guys is to be in control of it. Take a cold shower, go work out, run, exercise. Find some other outlet for that sexual energy, and the emphasis being on not giving in, because if you give in, you're weak. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, is that we teach like what, and I've said this before, is ever since the sexual revolution, for a very long time, we teach our boys to be in control of their sexuality. We don't want them to be like, walking around with a hard on all the time. We don't want them to be overly sexual because that's creepy or that's socially unacceptable.
Right.
So there are parts of the male sexual expression, male sexual nature that we have to teach our boys from an early age to be in control of. But what we're not doing right now is, because of the sexual revolution, because of where we are in history with respect to, or at least in Western society, is, and women will say, well, anything that is repressing a woman's, mating abilities or her repressing her hypergamous nature is a repression of some sort. Whereas right now, we don't teach our girls that. We don't teach them, don't send those things, don't do this, don't do that kind of stuff, because they are also of the same generation that thinks that they can live behind a screen and they can be okay with it.
Right. Two real quick stories here of unsolicited things that I've gotten. One goes back to 1997, so really the early days of the internet. Turned out it was sent to me by an FM jock on a competing station, but it was before everybody knew not to click on things. So there was an attachment. I clicked it on, and there's this picture of a woman performing a sexual act on a dog. Okay, and it was like, whoa! I wasn't expecting that. Thank God there were no kids around or anything like that. But that's one. Also, here, since I've been in Tulsa, I got one unsolicited picture from a lady listener that I actually knew of her. Hold on, this is wild, because she was actually dating a friend of mine. And she sent me a photo of her new implants. And with the thing, what do you think? By the way, there's no relationship going on here. This is completely unsolicited. So I immediately deleted that, blocked her number, blocked her email, all that kind of stuff. Because with what I do, there's always a very real possibility that somebody's trying to set me up. Right. Now, there's a lot of politicians that would love to get me in an Anthony Weiner, kind of deal.
Well, and it's so easy.
I thought it was really, and then my buddy, he's like, wait a minute, you're dating my buddy. It's like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Here's what it triggered it too. She had just seen me. She knew I was on the radio, but she had just seen me on Fox on the O'Reilly Factor. And then it was like, it's like an upgrade for her or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing is particularly now, and I just saw this thing about deep fakes, and you can now make like sort of these voice synthesizers that will like, if they want to say Rollo Tomasi said this, and they type it in, and it will sound like my voice. I heard one of like Jordan Peterson the other day. I think it was Sargon of Akkad was doing something about this, and so there's that deep fake. I mean, that's the level that we can get to right now. But the thing, I mean, as far as faking, whether or not like maybe you were in a bad position, they can make you look bad. Right. But like this kind of stuff is a setup, and it's a setup right now because of this understanding that first of all, we should believe all women, and then also it's easier now to set someone up like this than it has ever been before. So if you think that people can plant like kiddie porn on your laptop or something like that, that's the easy part.
We had a female, a lady that ran for city council here in Tulsa, and thankfully Michael Bates from Baseline went back and dug up her divorce proceedings. She had hired an attorney with the explicit purpose of him getting a woman to get in her husband's apartment and plant kiddie porn on his laptop. And even though that became public, she still ran for office. She didn't think that was a game changer. But man, you want to talk about hell hath no fury like that of a woman scorned. What a despicable trick.
Yeah. And how easy is it to do that? And here's the thing: is even if the guy is exonerated, even if this says this wasn't my laptop or whatever, just the fact that it's out there is enough to ruin the guy's reputation, and in some cases ruin the guy's life. He can never get a job. I mean, it would almost be better to go to jail, because at least you get 3 square meals in there. You can actually we can't earn a living, and you're on the street because people think you're a pedophile or whatever. Right. That's some crazy stuff. Did you want to move? Let's move on to boundaries.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with the pictures, real quick on this, I thought was sort of interesting. They said senders tend to be white, partnered. That's interesting. Partnered already, educated, and they tested higher for narcissistic traits. And this was interesting here. They said they were not more likely to use pornography, fantasize, or masturbate. When I think of somebody like Anthony Weiner, again, maybe not the prime example, I mean, I put all that stuff in with him because he's a creeper, you know. He's preying on underage girls. He's sending dick pics out, and I just like all of those things. Well, of course he does. He must, right? He's got to be like some sort of a sex addict. It's like that Jeffrey Epstein had to have 3 orgasms a day, and you thought you had problems, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, and here's the thing: is I think I'd put one of these links in the description. I did a 3-part series on why women think certain guys are creeps and why they don't think others.
Excellent series, by the way.
So if you got a guy who is built like Tom Brady, or you got a guy who's like, you know, ripped and looks good and everything, it's one thing to go and send pictures of your body and you look at it and that's welcome. You're not going to get women who are going to complain about that. They're not going to say that's creepy. But if it's a guy that looks like Anthony Weiner,
right,
we're going to say that's creepy. Well, because there is that hypergamous filter that goes through that. So one of the reasons why women get so pissed off at this is because it is what their hindbrain registers as a beta male trying to impersonate an alpha male. So when an alpha guy goes out there and he does something like that, and here's the thing: is most alpha guys won't do this because they don't need to. They don't have. It doesn't even occur to them because they know they're going to see this chick on a Saturday night and have sex with her anyways.
Right.
So it doesn't occur to them. So that's one of the reasons I was going to say is that, like, for that 80% of guys who are beta, that seems like a good idea. This seems like a way to connect with her. And it's interesting what you said there about how them being paired. Now that's what I wanted to get with is I'm thinking, like, are these guys like in a relationship with the girls that they're sending this to? Because I know in the case of Brett Favre, that wasn't the case. Yeah. He was paired, but not to the girl he was sending dick pics to.
Right.
So
They also said it's transactional, which is a word you use all the time.
Yes.
And they thought it was good. 82% of them thought it was going to excite or arouse the women. Again, the fundamental flaw is that women don't get aroused the same way we do. That's the flaw.
Yeah, that's something to very much keep in mind. I think the other side of this is that women are going to talk. Do you honestly think women are going to delete that picture? Do you think that they're not going to keep that to have something against you? You know, and the other thing I should say is this: is that if a woman sends you nudes at the way that the new revenge porn laws are.
I was just going to bring that up. Big.
You hang on to those. That's revenge porn. That's on you at that point. That's the thing that gets me right now is, and we were talking about this on Friday as well as the affirmative consent and how the American Bar Association is really trying to in some way codify like what I've said is enthusiastic consent for a very long time. But along with that, I think what you're going to see them trying to reinforce the laws for divorce porn because that is going to be a way for men to exonerate themselves. If we can find some way to make that inadmissible in a court of law, then this whole Me Too thing is all on women's side. So I think you're going to see that the laws with revenge porn sort of be reinforced along with that.
I worked for a guy back in Pennsylvania who, and I won't get into all the details. Anyways, his girlfriend at the time had a picture of him, and he was not well endowed. Hence, thereafter, his nickname was Inch High Private Eye. I mean, it didn't get him in any legal trouble, but it was like that was a joke. Everybody referred to him that way.
Yeah, you never. I mean,
that was the other one, Tiny Dancer.
Just to put a point on this, it's like, you guys don't. It's never a good idea. Never. It's not. You know, guys hit me up all the time and say, "Well, I did this. Is this alpha or this beta?" I can pretty much say that if you're sending dick pics to a girl, that's definitely beta. So
it's desperate. It's desperate.
Yeah, it's desperate, but it's like remember what I always say is like women want a guy who just gets it.
Right.
If you're sending dick pics, you don't get it. You don't understand how her sexuality works. In fact, you are proving yourself to be a beta because if she's savvy about the internet or she's savvy about, her own damn cell phone, and what do women know better than their damn cell phones these days? If she understands anything like that, she has to understand that you are putting yourself in the most vulnerable position you possibly could. Because if you say, "Yeah, I'm Rollo Tomasi, and here's my dick pic," and you put that on there, and to say that's not going to, particularly, and here's the thing: you better hope that your relationship stays pretty solid, because the moment you break up with her, your dick pic is right on Twitter or it's wherever else that she wants it to be. And you know what? Nobody is going to come to your defense, and everybody that she knows is going to say, "I can't believe how creepy. What kind of guy would do something like that?"
Yeah.
You're done. You're just don't do it.
No. So I want to get to the boundaries thing. One of the things that inspired me to go down this road today, one of my guilty pleasures is reading the Dear Abby columns. Again, I can't believe people still send her stuff. But there is this 30-year-old lady writes in to talk about her fiance, Bradley. Okay, the man of her dreams. Everything's perfect. The thing they're having issues about is when to have kids, kind of a deal. But here's what caught my attention. We decided on a long engagement so we could enjoy the planning process. Bullshit. No guy ever said that, ever in his life. No, honey, first of all, I know who's in control of this relationship. It's her, okay? She's controlling it, and she's the one setting the boundaries. She's the one making all the calls, and she's upset because her new husband, Bradley, is not ready to have kids as soon as she is because her biological clock is ticking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when we talk about boundaries,
right?
I think the very most important part of it is that most people, when you are in a relationship with anybody, and I don't even mean intimate, like if you can have a relationship with your boss or whatever, there are certain implied boundaries that you accept that you don't have to say, okay, you never do this or you always do this. Right. When you get into a working situation, I think it's pretty much a boundary that people should know out of hand that you don't steal from the till, right? You don't do anything to damage the company. There are those things that are just implied by you even getting the job in the first place. And so that's like, I think I probably will write a post about this. I've written a post called Boundaries before where I went into like sort of the nuts and bolts of how boundaries work. But when I was writing that, it was more focused on how to instate boundaries. And we'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute, but I think it's important to understand just sort of the nature of boundaries and why they're necessary. First of all, I think boundaries are almost more necessary for the person who is setting them than they are for the one that is expected to follow them. Right. Because that by the way that guy or that girl is setting those boundaries, the way that they do that, why are they doing that, and how are they going to go about doing that, says a lot about that person. What if there's expectations, if there's boundaries, if like guys always throw this one at me. They always say, well, my girlfriend wants to go on a girls' night out. She's going down to Vegas for the weekend with her girlfriends. She wants to go do this. She asked my permission to do this. And I'm afraid that if I tell her no, that I'm going to seem like an insecure guy. But if I tell her yes, she's going to go and she's going to walk all over me. She's going to cross a boundary that I think she should already know. And the thing is, this is where I go with this. And there's other instances of boundaries, okay? But this is an easy one to follow along with. When you are setting boundaries, your boundaries are only as strong as your ability or your capacity to back those boundaries up. So why do we need boundaries? Maybe that's where we start. Why is it that we need boundaries in the first place? What is it about a guy that said, like for most guys, particularly beta guys, when they get into this, those boundaries tend to center on mate guarding. They tend to center on what it is she can and she cannot do. She cannot send nudes to her beta orbiter friend. Okay, that's a boundary. I don't want my wife or my girlfriend or whatever sending nude pictures to somebody. Oh, he's just a friend. He's gay. Don't worry about it. Those kinds of things.
Why would a gay guy want a nude picture of you? Come on.
Right. So there's when I was talking to when I did the interview with Hotep Jesus, one of the things he was saying is like one of the things that really was kind of a deal breaker for him is having a wife or a woman or whatever that's intimate with him, that's a girlfriend of him, sharing that relationship, sharing the details of that relationship with anybody, with their girlfriends.
It is sacrosanct. You don't share it with anybody.
So that's another boundary. That was a boundary that he had. And it's like, you know what, if that's going to be it, then who am I in a relationship? Am I in a relationship with you, or am I in a relationship with your girlfriends too? And so that was a boundary. So that's something that I believe that women should already know. It's part of that thing. Like, you take the job, you should know that you don't steal from the till. If you're going to be monogamous with me, if you're going to be exclusive with me, you have to understand that for me to do that, if I'm a red pill aware guy, for me to agree to monogamy or to exclusivity with you, that comes with a lot of boundaries. I think that talking about those boundaries and saying, oh, you need to do this, or, or you giving these ultimatums, I think that it is far more effective for women to cross those boundaries and then feel the sting and touch the oven and get burned by the hot stove. I think it's far more important for guys to demonstrate a boundary than it is to explicate a boundary. And so people will say, well, open communication solves everything, or open communication this. And it's like, no, that just goes hand in hand with the thing about boundaries. It's like, yeah, you need to set boundaries, but who is setting the boundaries and why they're being set implies frame.
All right,
so
let me set this up for you. Okay. So we'll use the example you did. Okay. You never discuss intimate details of your relationship with other people. It's sacrosanct. It's just the two of you. I've shared the story before. My mom, growing up as a kid, she worked full time. She was a nurse, and she talked about all of the other nurses coming to work and bitching and complaining about their husbands. Okay. And she never did that. She would not talk about my dad, even though maybe she had some things to talk about from time to time, because what she saw was an ongoing pattern of, you got, now all of a sudden you got a cheering squad working with you that are against your husband, and they're urging you go, girl, you're right, you deserve better, and things wind up getting divorced. But my question for you is, okay, so you've found that particular person you want to be with, right? How do you establish those boundaries? I mean, up front, do you talk about it first? Do you ask, how do you feel about talking about intimate details with other people? How's she going to know your rules unless you tell her?
Okay, so I believe this. I believe that, first of all, there should be. This kind of gets back to the genuine desire question, right, or the desire dynamic. Okay, when a woman says to me, "Hey, I want to go out. I want to go out with my girlfriends on a girls' night out." Like, this is hypothetically, I'm thinking, if I had a girlfriend that asked me to do that, my first inclination is, why is she doing this? Why is that event, or why is what she wants to do more pressing or higher a priority to her than me, or who I am, how I feel, what I'm, how I'm going to respond to something like that? For guys who have a dominant, solid, controlled frame, that's hardly ever an issue for these guys, because the woman has a genuine desire to be with a guy that supersedes her wanting to go out on a girls' night out with her friend. So my first inclination is, why does she want to do something like that? If she comes and she says, I want to go out with my girlfriends, is that okay? First of all, if she's asking me that's okay, then that she is acquiescing to my frame. Okay. She understands that I have authority in this. Most girls, if they want to go and do something like that, they're just going to go, okay, see you later. Bye. I'm out. There are different degrees of how you are an authority within that relationship. So when a woman asks something like that, or she crosses a boundary, there needs to be consequences. There need to be immediate, demonstrable consequences for something like that. Because for the most part, if you're discussing something like that, you are negotiating her genuine desire. Right. If her genuine desire is not that she wants to prioritize you above what it is that she wants to do. Now, I'm using this as one example. There might be others. Like, for instance, if your wife or your girlfriend badmouths someone in your family, or what about this? What about, and I'm just thinking of boundaries that I would have, like arguing with you in public, like raising her voice to you in public, hanging up on you on the phone, like hanging you up. Yeah,
I miss the old phones where when you could hang up, you could actually, just slam it down, and they know you're really pissed off. Now with the cell phone, you can't do that.
You can't. Yeah, you don't know that you just got cut off or something. But like, that's what I mean. Is like that. I think when we think about boundaries, we think about like monogamy. Like, what is it? But there's other things too. There's other ways of crossing a line. And let me
comment on that though, because and this is going to be the female objection to this. Okay. Mm-hmm. So wait, you want me to get permission from you to do these things? Because you're treating me, you're not treating me like an adult, you're treating me like a child. I also think there is a very tactful way for a woman to not necessarily ask your permission, or beg for His Majesty's blessing. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's a simple courtesy, letting somebody know, this is what I'd like to do. Are you okay with that? It's all in the setup. It's all in the delivery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can remember one time this was back when I was working at a casino, and the marketing department that I was working with, it was entirely women, except for one other guy who was a good friend of mine. But I can remember one time my wife had called me while we were having dinner or we're having lunch somewhere. And she was calling me to ask me if it was okay if she could spend like $100 on some makeup. Right. So she calls me up, she's asking me this, and little did I know that these women, these catty women, all of which who have been divorced or never married, were listening on or eavesdropping on my phone call. And after I hung up with my wife, they look at me like I killed their little dogs. And I'm like, why? What's wrong? And they said, I can't believe she has to call you to ask permission to spend $100. I'm like, yeah, because that's the relationship we have. I'm the one that she comes to ask, permission to spend money, particularly if it's a lot of money on something like, makeup or something. But they had just lost their minds. And the reason
you are such a tight ass.
Oh yeah. Come on. No. Here's the thing. No, it gets better than that. It gets way better than that, Pat. It's you must be a tyrant at home. You must be, do we need to call the abuse hotline for your poor wife?
Glad I'm not married to you. That's the other one. I love that one.
Right? Yeah. So there's this implication that's what it's really all about. We got a super chat from Shark, man. I'm going to do super chats later on, guys. Just so we can stay, because it's a one-on-one here. So it's kind of tough to keep. What I got, Sam is taking care of super chats for me.
So back into this, the deal though, there's also the trust factor. The two things that I'm biggest on: trust and loyalty. If you're married to somebody, or if you've been dating somebody for a period of time, and you intuitively, intrinsically trust them, and it's a two-way street on that. I mean, if they want to go out with some friends on a night, I'm not going to be worried about it. I'm not going to think they're looking for the next best thing to come along, because we've built that relationship. So if you immediately say no to somebody like that, I think a couple things. It's going to be perceived as you're a dictator, you're controlling my life, or you really don't trust me, do you? Because that's how sometimes a woman's going to read that.
Or are you that? See, that's the thing, is that, like,
are you that insecure? We're back to that, right?
That insecure, right? And I like getting back to my story with the girls there, because this sort of plays into that. Is there is this preconception, I think, particularly amongst guys who get married or they're in a relationship, and if they're one of like the 85% of beta guys who get into this, they believe in the blank slate. They believe in egalitarianism. They think that that's the best way to have a relationship. You and I can talk about this from an old school masculine side of things, where the man is the head of the household. He's the guy who's making the decisions. He's the guy who's saying you can spend $100 on makeup or something like that. There is, because most women believe in this sense of egalitarianism, or that a successful good marriage is based on egalitarianism. Anything that goes against that is really a shock to their system. So for me to say there needs to be boundaries, and men, you need to be the ones that are setting the boundaries here. In any relationship, the one who needs the other the least is the one who has the most power within that relationship. And so there you get into these power dynamics. And so when we talk about like guys who make less money than their wives, who has the power? We want to pretend that it's all egalitarian. But when a woman makes more money than a guy, all that egalitarian crap goes right out the window. So unless that guy has something to offset that, unless that guy has a 9-inch personality, or he's really, he's really good with his hands or whatever, maybe he's struggling to get to a better place. He's got his own business. Something there might be some way to offset that. But let's be honest, in any relationship, there's a dominant and there's a submissive, or there is that interplay. And it happens even in homosexual relationships. There's always a dom and there's always a sub. And so when I tell guys, you need to set boundaries, or you need to, I'm trying to, reinforce the importance of boundaries to guys, they're uncomfortable with that. They're uncomfortable with it because they believe in this. It's all fair play, or she's just like me, or just like what we were talking about before with the dick pics. These are guys who assume that men and women are exactly the same, and that we should all play even Steven, and we should all be in an egalitarian marriage, or, society, or whatever you want to talk about. But so to them, to step up and be the one who controls the frame of that relationship is like an alien thought to them. It's like they would never even consider something like that. So they think what pop psychology is going to tell them. They believe it's all about open communication. The problem with open communication is that observing a process changes that process. You cannot negotiate genuine desire. You can negotiate all kinds of things, but you're not going to if a woman doesn't want to do something, she's not going to do it. She can do it out of obligation. She can have duty sex with you because you said, hey, you know what? I'm the husband and you need to be having sex with me. Okay, first of all, you're negotiating that desire, but you're not going to get the genuine desire. When a boundary is set, the only way to really make that a legitimate thing for a woman is if she wants to do that, if her desire is to remain in those boundaries. What do we say all the time? You cannot control other people's behavior. You can control your own, but you can't control their other people's behavior.
You can't control what other people do or what things happen, but you can control how you react.
How you react to those things, and that's where when we talk about boundaries, that's the most important part of setting boundaries. How do you react to those things? Mm-hmm. So if your reaction is to go, well, since we're both egalitarian and all this stuff, let's talk about it. And here's the boundaries that I want. And what are the boundaries that you want? And we'll all behave accordingly. Well, the thing is you can talk about that till you're blue in the face. If she doesn't want to do that, she's not going to do that. Or if she doesn't want to do that, but she still behaves and she does, she's doing it out of obligation. And at some point, there's going to be resentment. And your ability or your capacity to enforce those boundaries is dependent on what whose frame you're in, what your power balance looks like in that relationship. Because there's no such thing as an egalitarian marriage. There's no such thing as an egalitarian relationship between men and women. There's always going to be one who has to step in and take control of that situation, or there's always going to be one that's going to sort of take a back seat. And it might be in different areas of your relationship as well. So what I tell guys is you need to get more comfortable with viewing yourself as the dominant, viewing yourself as this is your frame. The frame you enter into that marriage with is generally the one that you're going to be stuck with. And so if you're going in there and you think you're playing even Steven, I will tell you right now, if that's the thing that's in your head, if you think you are in an egalitarian marriage right now, I will guarantee you your wife dominates you. Why? Because she has the sex.
I had a guy call into my program before, and he said, me and my wife are equal partners. And I said, bullshit. I said, You just told me she's in charge. I said, name for me the country that has two co-equal presidents. It doesn't exist because you can't have two people driving.
Right. I've got a really great post. I'll go dig it up here. It's called Mutiny. It's on my blog, The Rational Male. And this really kind of rubbed me the wrong way because there was this idea, and this was probably back in 2012 or 2013, I think. Mm-hmm. And there was this idea that a marriage, there used to be a guy who ran this blog, and he has a book called Married Man's Sex Life. The author's name was Athol K. And I really kind of took him to task on this because he said, a man should be in charge and he should be the captain of the ship, but the woman should be the first mate and she should have first say or first right of refusal. I go, that's not how it works, man. I know that's a nice fantasy to entertain yourself with, but what you're doing is you're saying, okay, well, I'm still going to be the man, but we're going to have an egalitarian. I'm going to be magnanimous here, and I'm going to let you give me your input, honey. And of course, women eat that up. They go, well, of course he should listen to what she has to say. In the end, if your source of authority, if your power base in that relationship decays or deteriorates, you won't have a first mate anymore. You will have a mutiny on your hand is what you will have. So you can pretend all you want that girl, that your wife or your girlfriend, whatever, is your first officer or whatever. And that might be great. It's not like I don't listen to my wife. It's not like I don't take what she says into consideration, but I don't consider my wife my first mate. She's my wife. She's not my best friend. She's not my whatever. She is involved in this. She's a person that's in this relationship, but I am going this direction and she is a complement to my life, not the focus of my life. So when I see stuff like that, when people say, well, you gotta have a first mate, no. You don't understand how that balance works. It's sort of this idea well, I want an egalitarian marriage, but I don't really want an egalitarian marriage. And So
is she at least your favorite person in the world?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Here's the thing, maybe I just celebrated 23 years of marriage with my wife back in July. And people want to say that, well, Rollo must hate women, or he's always against marriage and stuff. It's like, no, I'm not against marriage. I think it's a great idea. I just think the way that we do it right now is too dangerous for most men to have that risk. And here's a really shining example of this, is that if you are dragged into this idea that marriage needs to be this egalitarian thing, you are, first of all, you're fooling yourself, but you have to ask yourself, why do you think that? Why do you want that in the first place? What was it that led you to come to the conclusion that that's a better idea than you holding the frame and you driving the car and you directing the ship?
Because you've been programmed like that since your earliest years. Exactly. By society, by the schools.
Exactly. Well, and here's the other thing is like the sexual revolution is about 50 years old. Okay. We're only talking a blink of an eye in human history, because right up until 50 years ago, you and I wouldn't even be having this conversation. It would just be like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm providing for my family. I'm a husband and I'm a father, and I'm going this direction. And if a woman wants to come along with me, she can be part of that. But since the sexual revolution, and we've empowered women and we put women in the workplace and they can make their own damn money and they don't need no man. Okay. Don't think that in any way erases the natural innate dynamic of a masculine dominance that is attractive to women, and women being submissive and women going and being a complement to a man's life. Hey, you know what? If women want to go off and they want to play masculine and they want to be the man, great, go ahead. Yeah, I'm not saying you can't do that, but just understand that there are consequences and there is a price to be paid because of that. So as part of that, I think, and I wanted to get to this part too, because I really think that when it comes to setting boundaries, the most important thing to consider in all of this, or the reason that this is even an issue in the first place, is because people are uncomfortable with being an authority, particularly men, because they believe in this egalitarian stuff. So they don't give themselves permission to be the man. They don't give themselves permission to be the guy who is an authority and making those decisions. Now, this is probably like kind of silly to you because you've got, you got a lot of kids and you've been married for, I don't know how long you've been married for, but you don't think about this, but a lot of other guys do. 80% of beta dudes are always thinking about it because they think that they need to play even Steven. And so as a result of that, they won't give themselves permission to do anything that would in any way put them above another individual.
And you're saying most guys, 80% of guys don't want to be in control. Is that what you're saying?
They don't want to seem like the domineering asshole, typical, chauvinist, whatever that archetype is that they have.
Are you directing that at me?
No, not you. No. But here's the thing. Okay. And this is what I call it. And you're going to laugh at this. This is what I call the Caesar Milan paradox. Okay. Now I'm sure you've watched The Dog Whisperer. Have you ever watched an episode of The Dog Whisperer?
Yes.
Okay. So if you ever watched The Dog Whisperer, in like 90% of the cases that he goes to deal with these dogs, right? In almost every damn case, he's dealing with a pet owner, a dog owner that is unwilling to discipline the dog, that is unwilling to say, no, Pookie, you don't do that, or they're just kind of like standing there. They won't give themselves even permission.
The dog is in control of the narrative.
Be an authority over a dog. And now the reason I brought this up is because in that thread that you were talking about when we first started this, everybody wants to compare this to behaviorism. They want to say, well, it's just like training your dog. No, training a human is not like training a dog. But the one similarity that they do have is that there still needs to be a dominant and there needs to be a sub. And so the reason why dogs misbehave and the reason why dogs fly off the handle and the reason dogs don't do what you want them to do is because a dog doesn't recognize you as the alpha pack leader. And damn near every Dog Whisperer episode, that's the case. And so you have this horribly misbehaved dog, and they don't want to give themselves permission to crush the poor doggy's little spirits, right? They don't want to be somebody who seems like in there. Maybe it's something like in these people's heads, but they don't want to in any way exercise authority over their pet, even their pets. Now, I got one other comparison for you too. Remember when Charlize Theron had that one, she has like her adopted son or whatever, who has decided that want to be like transgender or something like that. And what did she say? She said, I don't have the right to step in and tell my daughter, tell my son, whatever it is, what it is that they're supposed to do about those things. That to me right there is as another indication of this generation of people, maybe 2 or 3 generations, who don't want to have authority over another human being. They think that that's wrong. They think that that dynamic makes them a tyrant, or it makes them a bully, or they think that exercising that authority or having that authority makes them, at the very least, suspect of being selfish, of being a prick, of being domineering, that kind of stuff. And so that's really where the basis, I think, of setting boundaries comes from, because most people won't allow themselves to be the most guys won't allow themselves to be the primary in that relationship. And so what happens is, you know how power abhors a vacuum, right? Mm-hmm. So if a man is not going to be the one who's going to step up and provide the security, or be the guy who's going to make the decisions, or is going to be decisive, is going to be the one who's directing the ship, that woman, because women's hypergamy is based on 2 things, alpha fucks and beta bucks, and that beta buck side of things is looking for security. It's looking for long-term security. And if you are not going to be the guy who's going to provide that, that woman is going to step in and provide it for herself and provide it for her children, because that's the way that women evolved. Because without that, they died. Out back in our ancestral past, if a woman, the number one thing that a woman needed was protection, and she needed security, and that was provided to her by men. And so in the back of her head, if that guy is not the guy that can go and provide that, she's going to have to be the one. She's going to have to wear the pants. She's going to have to be the one who makes the decisions. And because we have generation after generation of guys who are in this egalitarian mindset, who don't want to crush the little doggy spirit, who don't want to seem like their asshole dad, those are the guys who are going to be in these relationships where the woman is the dominant one, and she's the one who's going to be setting the rules for that guy. And then the boundaries are going to be set, not by you, but by her.
Did you want to get to
hold on.
Super? I was going to say, we didn't talk about the ultimatums. You said ultimatums are ineffective, and you said, why do beta men set boundaries out of fear? So we had those 2 we wanted to get into.
Mm-hmm. All right. First of all, and then this got to one of the super chats was this. In fact, this is a really good one for that. Where was it? Was it Shark Man said something to the effect about the GNOs or something, like the girls' night out. It's very similar. Why is that? It seems to me that if some guys will say, well, that seems like you're being beta because you're concerned with something like that. And you're right, because guys who are alpha simply don't care about that kind of stuff. Go do what you're going to do, because I've got 10 other girls over here on speed dial, and I can go and do whatever it is that I want to do. They don't issue ultimatums. Ultimatums are declarations of powerlessness. Now, people will call me to the carpet for this. Why do you say that? Because you need to stand. It kind of goes against like what when most guys are communicating, they do so in an overt way.
Define what you mean by ultimatums, because in my head, I sort of have a different definition.
An ultimatum, then maybe this is a subjective definition. I'll be willing to admit that. But to me, an ultimatum is when you are saying something that you feel so powerless that you have to tell that person overtly, if you don't do X, then I'm going to go do Y. Okay. It's this verbalized ultimatum, really. I mean, it's this verbalized contract, it's verbalized negotiation, where it's really not a negotiation. Is I am declaring to you that if you do this, I'm going to go do something else. And
let me jump in on that, because I very rarely give, I guess, what you would define as an ultimatum. But when I say something, if you do A, this is what's going to happen. Okay, that isn't a threat; it's a promise. And if they do that, the check signed. It's going to happen, and I would never back off on it either. And the people that I've been around pretty much know that from me. But again, right. I don't. It's what you're talking about is almost like we've all seen this. Parents, women usually, but sometimes guys with little kids. if you don't stop doing this, I'm going to count to 3. Okay. And if you're not done doing it, well, the kid knows, even the little kid knows it's an empty threat.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Is like, boundaries are only as effective as your capacity to back them up. So putting effort in it. Yeah. So if you say something and you don't back up the threat, because that's really what it is. I was going to add this as well, as boundaries require dread. There has to be a fear of loss. There has to be a fear of consequence. There has to be in a way, I guess that's an ultimatum as well. But if you're declaring an ultimatum, if you're saying, if you don't do this, what you're really saying is, you're saying, I feel so powerless in this situation that I need to tell you that if you don't do X, then I'm going to go do Y. And if you don't do something after that, or if you don't back that up with anything, then that's an empty threat. And what you've done is you have made yourself look even worse than you had before. So why do we do that? Well, because we fear, or beta men tend to fear not being in control, or not having something go the way that they would like to have it gone. So they have to be overt and declare an ultimatum. And if that doesn't happen, then, it comes back on them. It's for alpha guys, like I was thinking of this is when your silence creates more dread than what you can say, that's when you've reached a more like an alpha apex right there. When you're silenced, when you can just, what is it? I think in the 48 Laws of Power, something about, reputation is everything, guard it with your life. When your reputation precedes you, when your silence says more than your ultimatums ever could, that's when you're there. So it's like, why?
I get that. And we talked about this before. I get this all the time. And it can be people who have been around me for years, even from coworkers. If I'm quiet, just because of the way I look or whatever, people automatically assume I'm mad. Even with my kids, well, is dad mad? Who did what? Kind of a deal. And it's not, I'm not mad. Okay. Well, sometimes I am, but most of the time I'm not. It's just that I talk for 4 or 5 hours in a row, which is not normal for a person, and sometimes I like to be a little quiet.
It's funny. It's like with my own dad, my dad could be really abusive. He could be really outrageous and really aggressive. But I tell you, man, the times that scared the hell out of me and my brother the most was when he was silent, when he didn't say anything. And you're like, uh-oh, something's really bad's about to happen. And I think that's, and I hate to be using these as examples, because there's other ways to establish frame. There's other ways to establish dominance. It's easy for us to point to male aggression. It's easy for us to point, or even female aggression. It's easy for us to make those the example of what, how to go about setting boundaries. Setting boundaries doesn't have to be even talking about it. It can just be, if you did something, here's my response to you doing that. Like, demonstrate, do not explicate. So, but like I said,
in fact, talking about the silence thing, I've got to say, and I use it on the program all the time, I've never regretted not saying something. And I've also found, especially probably over the last 3 years, I try to listen before I respond. Because a lot of times if I listen, it's going to change my entire mindset. Something maybe wasn't what it looked like originally. And I think that's sort of the wisdom that comes with age. Yeah. Hopefully, not everybody does it, but I've noticed that myself.
My hesitation with the whole boundaries thing is, first of all, it's very pop psychology. It's like, oh, we just talk about stuff and things will be okay. Like you're expecting. The other thing is you're expecting, particularly if it's between men and women, if you're setting boundaries for your woman, understand that women interpret what you're saying through an emotional filter first and not the rational filter first. So for men, you might be like, guys, another sort of, bad result of believing in the blank slate or believing in egalitarianism is men thinking that first of all, men thinking that women react sexually to dick pics, but also that the woman that they're with is going to be just as equally rational as any male, because they believe that, men and women are exactly the same, right? And so they don't understand that women interpret what it is that they're saying through that emotional filter first, and then maybe it gets to the rational side. So guys think, well, all I got to do is sit her down at the table and I'm going to say, here are my boundaries. Here's what I expect from you. What do you think? Sign on the contract right here, because this is going to be our contract for us to have a relationship. And this negotiation that they believe, because they believe that they can negotiate genuine desire. They can't. You're only going to have obligated compliance out of that. But they believe that that's what they can do. They believe that she's going to be this co-rational, co-equal agent that is going to share the same degree. Like, remember the guy who had written down all of those, or he had the spreadsheet of all the times his wife said no to him, yes. Or the guy, there's that guy who had no to having sex. And then there's the other guy who kept getting rejected all the time by women. And so I think he kept a spreadsheet or a log of some sort. And he wanted to really find out why it is that he was getting rejected, or what is it that women really want from a guy. And I always thought that was like the most ridiculous thing, because first of all, women want a guy who just gets it. So if you're sitting her down at the table and you're negotiating, here's the terms of our agreement here, and you have sex with me 4 times, and like that's going to, like a woman's going to genuinely have a desire to do that. But the guys don't get it. They don't understand that. So when you start negotiating, when you start keeping, track of how many times your wife rejected you in bed, how many times, you get rejected, and you want to find out this information, that comes from a belief that women are just as rational and just co-equal agents as men. So they think that they're talking to another guy, because any other guy, I'm going to talk to you and we're going to exchange information. We have a problem. For men to solve a problem, we exchange information. It doesn't work like that with women. So if you've got a problem with that woman, you're not talking to the rational side of her initially. You're talking to the emotional side of her. And so they don't get it. They don't say, I had this contract. I negotiated all these things. I asked her what she wanted. I told her what my boundaries were. I went and logged all this stuff on my Excel spreadsheet, and she still acted in a different way. How could she not do that? How could she act so irrational? They must be fickle. No, they're not. They just don't want to do what you want them to do. And they understand that you don't get it. They understand if you're asking them to negotiate those things, they know that you don't get it. But how do you do that? Well, you've got to do it through your actions. You've got to do it through consequences. You've got to be the kind of guy that she wants to obey your boundaries. I don't have to go. I have never gone to my wife and said, okay, here, honey, we're going to have, these are going to be your boundaries for today. And we don't have a contract like that. We have a marriage license. That's about as far as it goes, right? Because we understand. People keep saying, well, like men and women, a good relationship takes a lot of work. No, it doesn't. It doesn't take any work at all, man. I mean, if you have that good connection, if you have that together, I can count on the fingers of one hand how many times I've had a fight with my wife, and none of them have lasted more than a day. And why is that? Because I understand what's expected of me. She understands what she's expected of her, and she wants to obey my boundaries. I want to be with her. I want her to be in my life. She wants to be in my life. And we don't have these conflicts of setting boundaries or something like that. She already knows that because she prioritizes me above anything else that she wants to do. Or maybe she asked my permission to go and buy makeup or something like that. Okay, fine. But that's not in writing. That's not in like, we didn't sit down at the dinner table one day and said, okay, these are going to be the terms of our contract for being married to each other.
I'm going to set up a GoFundMe page for your wife after the show so we can buy her some makeup.
Right. Okay. Kickstarter. Yeah. My own brand. Yeah.
$100, man. Jeez, come on. That's nothing nowadays.
What a hard ass. I know.
Yeah,
well, this was a while ago.
Yeah.
You want to get to some of these supers?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, let's do some of these supers. And before we get started on the supers, I do want to say that we do now have an official sponsor,
right?
And his name is Aaron Clary. And I made up this really cool thing I got to put on here. This is his book. It's called The Curse of High IQ. It's available on Amazon. I even made a nice little banner here for him. You can find it here at Amazon. I don't know where he got that picture, but I had to use it. It was just too good not to use. So
now is the curse of the high IQ.
Curse of high IQ. This is one. Yeah. Aaron. I've known Aaron since 2009, I think, and just a really good guy. And he wanted to be a part of the show, and I've interviewed him a few times. I think back on Red Band Group, and then once just privately. I think we've had a few shows before. Really good dude. He's got another book out that's called Bachelor Pad Economics. He mentions me a lot in that one as well. So I just want to throw that out there. He is a new sponsor of this show.
I thought it was going to be Gillette for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just want to throw that out there. Go check that. That's the book he's really pushing these days, and I think that's pretty good. I've actually read 2 of his books. I read that one, and I read Bachelor Pad Economics. Okay, so let's get started here. AMG Expat says, "Thank you, Rollo. I gave your first book to a friend who asked about it on my shelf. Changed his life too." Well, thank you very much for that. What else do we have here? Andrew Penna, New Zealand, $10 from New Zealand. I wonder what that comes out to. Boundaries, reducing attention and or making direct comments. What's a method of approach to make clear comments without seeming powerless? Sometimes attention reduction feels passive and feminine. I get what you're saying. I think I was just about to tell you something like that, Pat. Most guys, because they believe in this egalitarianism, they think that that the woman is going to respond to them as rationally as a guy would. There's also the guys who don't like to have to deal with that. They don't want to deal with women's emotionalism. They complain about this. They say, "Why can't a woman just be like a guy? Why can't you just tell her something? She agrees to it. You know, you're good with each other. You shake hands and you go and you do what you're going to do. Why doesn't that happen?" Well, first of all, people are genuinely different. That's why. But guys, there's sort of and I would say you probably fit into this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of guys want to have their communication style be the only communication style. So if I say what I mean and I mean what I say, I expect whoever I'm talking to be the same. I expect Rolla to do that, and I expect my wife to do the same thing. Well, it's a little bit different when you're dealing with a man and you're dealing with a woman, because women's communication style is not overt, it's covert. And a lot of guys
I totally agree with that. If we had an issue, I would address you much differently than I would address a woman.
Right. But see, there's this idea for these guys. I think these guys who think that they're hard asses or something, and they think it's beta to deal with a woman on a woman's level, to use her native language, so to speak, right? To understand that she's going to interpret you through an emotional filter before she gets to that rational side. So when I'm dealing with my daughter, I'm dealing with my wife, I know how I know the way to communicate with them effectively. And that comes from experience. I think a lot of guys who think that they should just, be a hard ass and expect a woman to come over to their overt kind of communications all the time. I think they see that as sort of a failure if they don't do that.
The best way to communicate with a wife or daughter in particular is what you hit on earlier, a story. If you got a story, you're going to make an emotional connection with them. Right. It's going to resonate, and they're going to actually get what you're trying to convey.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because a lot of guys don't think that game or red pill awareness with respect to game. I'm not saying pickup artistry, but some parts, but they don't. I don't think they understand how that applies to a long-term relationship, or how that applies to their working relationships, or with their daughter or something like that. I don't talk to my daughter in the same way I talk to you, or I talk to the guys that I work with. Okay. I understand that I have to, well, first of all, I'm familiar with her, but second of all, I have to communicate with her on a wavelength that she's going to understand, because it's more efficient, because it's more pragmatic for me to go and do those things. Go ahead.
I want to tell a story.
Okay. He was just going to say what's a method so yeah, exactly. How do you solve that problem? Like, how do you come to sort of an agreement? I think it's really comes from experience. I mean, from my side, I think it comes from experience and understanding how women communicate. And then, trial and error, because a lot of guys will think that your girlfriend or your wife might think you're just this complete asshole one time because you said something that you didn't even think was in any way offensive. I can't believe you said something.
Let me give you an example here. And this is, I think I've mentioned to you in the past, I had some problems with my older daughter. And I've told this story on the radio, obviously a longer version. But she was home. We were actually in my office where I'm broadcasting right now. And I said, "You look like my daughter." I said, "You sound like my daughter." I said, "But I don't know who you are."
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got a picture of her when she was 6 years old catching her first fish. And I said, you see that picture over there? I said, that's my little girl. I said, if you see her, tell her I love her, I miss her, and I want her home.
Mm-hmm.
And she just broke down in absolute tears. And we hugged for what seemed like an eternity. Mm-hmm. But that talk, and I wasn't thinking this stuff through. It just came to me, right? Mm-hmm. That was an epiphany, and it was also it was a pivot point. She completely flipped things around. But that was the story. You know, when I told it on the radio, I mean, that grabbed people. I mean, I wasn't doing it for that reason, but it grabbed people because it's a powerful story.
Right. And what did you do there, though? See, what you did was you set a boundary.
Right.
Without an ultimatum. Yep. You said, look, the subtext of all this is you said, look, I am only going to communicate with you as who you are, rather than what you're trying to do right now. You said, I only want to talk to the little girl who caught that fish.
Right.
I don't know who you are right now. So you just set a boundary. I'm not going to communicate with you in the way that you're communicating with me right now. And without any, raising your voice, without any contract.
I didn't yell. I didn't say, if you don't do this, you're out of the house or anything like that.
Great example. Let's see. I got one here. I got this really good one too. Sharkman sent me $5 and I wanted to put this one on here. Thanks for the tip there. It says it's well documented in the PUA community that some women simply won't cheat. How is this possible if hypergamy is true? Are they just exceptions? Well, if a woman wants to be, and this is an easy answer, if a woman wants to be monogamous, she's monogamous for two reasons. She has to be, or she wants to be. So she's there by obligation, or she's there because she wants to be. You are a high enough value guy that she doesn't want to cheat on you. This is the genuine desire thing. So I don't know where you're getting this idea that this in any way conflicts with hypergamy. If a woman doesn't want to be with you, she's not going to be with you. So like what we were just saying a minute ago is like you can control your behavior, but you're not going to control her behavior. You're not going to stop her from wanting to cheat if she wants to cheat. She might not cheat, but she might want to cheat. So I don't see how this in any way conflicts with hypergamy.
It's something of greater value over hypergamy that overrides it.
Well, yeah, I say, but see, here's the thing: is it's not that. I should say hypergamy in that sense would be settled, right? Remember, hypergamy is based on doubt. Can I do better than this guy? Mm-hmm. If that answer is no, then yeah, she's simply not going to cheat. She doesn't want to. There's also the other thing is that there are women who can override hypergamy. I keep saying hypergamy is not a straitjacket. Okay. Right up until really the sexual revolution, we had religion, we had society, we had all kinds of societal norms
that were buffers through other means. For example, you talked about romance novels. It's like, I guess, porn for guys in that they're feeding that need.
Yeah, it's not that they aren't hypergamous; it's that it has been settled, or they can't affect that what they would like to with respect to hypergamy. Mm-hmm. Heavy Metal is Law says 5 pounds. How the contradiction between women wanting sexy sons and raising promise keepers is just down to women not being self-aware enough. No, remember that when sexy sons theory is that women want to get with guys who are going to be genetically superior, at least to the point where they will produce good-looking children. Because if they have children that can reproduce, that means that, or they have good-looking children, those children will then reproduce and carry on her genetics into the next generation. So for guys, it's a one-shot thing, right? It's like we want to know paternity and we want to make sure that the kid is ours. For women, they know that the kid is ours or is theirs. So the sexy sons theory is it's a very simple theory. It's that women want to get with the best looking guys that they can get with. And that's a subconscious thing. If they can do that, then it means that their own genetics will be passed on into the future because they had sexy sons. Well, what you're confusing here is like, well, why would they make them promise keepers? Promise keepers, I think what you're kind of getting at is like you want these really dutiful, security providing children. They want men who are going to be sexy sons and go and reproduce, but they also want them, they're kind of conflicted in the sense that they want the guy who was the security provider, not like the asshole that they married or they reproduced with.
That's why women want their husbands to go to Promise Keepers, because it's like beta training camp. It's going to make you a better beta for me.
Yeah, well, you're thinking of Promise Keepers. He's referring to Promise Keepers as in the terms of my blog post on Promise.
It's not the religious Promise Keepers.
Yeah, not the religious one, but Promise Keepers in the sense that she wants a guy who is going to be a security provider for her because she's a single mother, right? So her son, she turns him into kind of like this beta security blanket for herself, because he ends up becoming the person that the asshole beta that she had sex with and reproduced with never could be. So you've got a guy. Really, what it is it's almost an attempt to balance the sexy son's alpha asshole with the guy that she was hoping she could lock down or she could change the asshole into. So she can't do it with him. She's going to do it with her son. Sharkman again.
You got YOLO's there?
Yeah, I got one from YOLO.
Let me read that one. Let me throw that one.
Go ahead. Yeah.
He says, "Hi, Rolo. What does it mean to don't argue or fight with a woman, but change her mood? Any example?" Thank you.
Really what that is it's conflict. Okay. So first off, you need, and this is old PUA stuff, but it's psychology 101. You need to leave a woman with an emotional impact. Whether that's good or whether that's bad is kind of irrelevant, particularly in the first part, but there needs to be some sort of emotional association with that guy. So when that woman remembers you, or she remembers the incident, or she remembers seeing you, she gets just kind of a little taste of that dopamine hit that she got when she was there experiencing it with you. So it's like, as far as don't fight with that person, it's not so much like don't fight, but just make sure that you're leaving that emotional impact with that woman. Changing her mood is, how are you going to apply yourself to make that emotional contact with her? So if you've got a woman who's in sort of down and out, you want to leave her with, do you want to leave her on an upbeat, or do you want to leave her down? Well, you want to change her mood and make her leave with you making that emotional impact with her. So how do you go about doing those things? Well, I mean, that's really kind of up to the individual. It's kind of up to the guy and how he's going to apply himself in doing those things.
Hey, real quick, while I'm thinking of it, the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, I don't know if you've noticed the language. I always talk about he who controls the language controls the debate. When they refer to Epstein's victims, they refer to them as underage women. Think about this, Catholic priests, okay? You never hear them referred to as underage, men. No, because they're boys. And with Epstein, too, they're girls. They're under 18, they're girls. But it's very subtle. You don't see it, but they're controlling what you think about it.
Yeah, it's neuro-linguistic programming too. So they're always going to use certain verbs and certain adjectives to describe certain things to lean you in the direction that they want you to. They want you to think. So yeah, so it's like underage girls, right? So it's not like, oh, this guy wasn't.
No, they said underage women. Underage women. They don't call them girls. Underage women. When it comes to the priests, they don't say underage men. No, they say boys.
Underage boys. Yep. That again, control the language. Control the narrative. Prussia Kid. What do you think when people drop by your house uninvited? I don't know.
Depends who they are, I guess, right?
Okay, I guess it depends who they are. I'm okay with it. Prussia Kid again says, are you automatically relinquishing your boundaries if you're dating a coworker?
What's the old adage? Never crap where you eat.
Yeah, right? Never put your dick in the company ink. I don't know how it goes. Just don't send her dick pics.
You ever date anybody where you work?
That's a Lycus thing too. Lycus always says, like never date anybody that you're working with.
Right.
I tend to agree with that, particularly if you care about where you're working with.
Yes.
And so that used to be his thing, but like now I'm a little bit more hesitant to say even in that case, even if you don't care where you're working at, but right now in the internet age that can follow you. So if you have I have two rules that I tell guys: never date anybody that you're working with, and never date a girl that you are at a gym that you really like. Because if you have to be at that gym and you see that person there again, that makes everything very, very awkward. So those are two things. I just, don't date a coworker. Are you relinquishing your boundaries? Well, no, because you haven't set any boundaries if you've already started, dating somebody from your work. So, if you have a boundary, if you believe in what I say, if you say, you know what, I don't want to date anybody from work, and then you do that, you've essentially relinquished one of your own boundaries so that you can have that relationship.
Now, there's another thing, having a business with, either your spouse or longtime girlfriend, because with some people that can actually work, it can actually strengthen a relationship. Other people, it can be the thing that breaks it. Because you're spending too much time together, and now it's no longer, necessarily romantic, but there's more business, and the business tends to stress everything else out.
Yeah, I'm always thinking that's a real bad idea anyways, but like a lot of guys now, I mean, even Sheryl Sandberg was saying that, men don't want to work in the same area. They won't want to segregate themselves at the workplace anyways. And there's a reason for that. Because it's vulnerable. It puts a guy in a vulnerable. They're not fearful. They won't say, "Oh, they're fearful." They're not fearful. They're just being, cautious about it. Bjorn Sasson gave me €5. Says, besides practicing in the field, is there any good source, book, or whatever for improving your storytelling skills? I think that there's a couple actually really good. I mean, there's the old school guys. You can look up Mystery Method. There's a lot of stuff in there. Even old school Neil Strauss was pretty good. Look up anything prior to 2014, Real Social Dynamics. There's some guys that are going some good follows. I think if this is what you want to do, if you want to hone your skills, look up guys like Tony Francis. Look up Tom Ferrero. Say who else? Who else is a good one? There's look at my Twitter feed for some of the PUAs on there. I think some of those guys are good. Also, you might want to check out John from Modern Life Dating. Those are some good resources.
By the way, from the radio business, we mentioned Lycus before. Lycus is a part of the reason he was so successful. He is a master storyteller. He knows how to set things up. Limbaugh, obviously a great storyteller. Michael Savage, Glenn Beck, some of the better talk show hosts are great storytellers. But Lycus, especially when it comes to stuff we're kind of talking about, he's like the king. He set the standard.
Yeah, definitely, and that's important because that helps you become more of a. I mean, first of all, a lot of guys will say that when they're on a date or something, they don't know what else to say. They don't know how to continue a story. They don't know how to leave breadcrumbs is what I call. I've got a great post called Breadcrumbs, and it's how you can sort of seed a conversation with storytelling, but seeding a conversation so that you're sort of dragging a woman to conversationally dragging her to topics and to things that you want her to think about.
Right.
So it's what I call breadcrumbs. It's like leading the conversation. And the best way to do that, of course, is through storytelling.
Any more questions?
I think that's it. If you have not hit the like button, I think we're just.
I was just going to say that. Yes, smash the like button, please.
We're tightening it up here. Pat, you and I will be on Friday. See, I got my little banner here now. This is great. I love Stream. Also, I don't want to give a big shout out to StreamYard. Really great app. Yes. If you are in any way a live streamer, this is definitely the one. And this is in the beta too.
Have you seen? It's a professional. Somebody told me the professional model is available. Have you seen it?
No, I actually plunked down my $20 for the paid version of this, and I really like it. When they come out with the public, live version of it, I haven't seen it yet. This is the public beta that we're working on right now, and I really dig it.
A little something unusual. Usually we promo things coming up. I see Sam there. I would, if you're somebody who believes in the power of prayer, I would ask you to pray for Sam. Sam's going through some really crazy health issues right now. I would encourage you to follow him on Facebook, Twitter, as well. But if you're the praying kind of person, put one in there for Sam. Seriously, he's in a real struggle.
Yeah. And I've been seeing Sam. Sam is actually out here in Nevada, and he's just not too far from me right now. So I'm trying to make an effort to get out to see him.
He was in Tulsa, but I missed him because we were like 2 ships passing in the night.
Yeah. In fact, I've got a air conditioner unit I have to give him, so I'm gonna take that out to him tomorrow. But he's having some health issues right now. So, anyways, what do you got going? We're gonna do Friday at 9:05 Eastern.
Yep.
And tomorrow I'm going to be doing a live interview with Jack Napier. And if you want to, I don't know what his URL is for that.
I need to meet him.
Yeah, he's a good dude, really good. From London, from Britain, I believe. Good dude. I will be talking to him tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific. So I guess that would be 1 o'clock our time or your time. So that's what I got going on.
You gonna put a link up for that tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll put it in the description. I don't have one with me right now, but I'll be doing that. I'll be doing Rule Zero again on Saturday. I believe it is Ryan who's going to be hosting on that one. So if you guys want to pick that up, go check that out.
By the way, I caught a little bit of that on Saturday. And Ryan was really in the zone yesterday.
Rocking it. Yeah, that was a really good show for us. I really enjoyed that too. He has
not seen the movie Shallow Hal. He basically, I said, you got to watch this. This is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, good. Yeah, really good show. Check out and that's on my channel. It's the one that was prior to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's about it for us. Anything else you got for us?
That's it. Have a great week.
All right, man. Great. I will see you on Friday.
Take care. All right. Anything else?